Hi, I'm Jenna,
And I'm Erin.
and welcome to this week's episode of Between Two Filing Cabinets, where we give you tips, trends, troubles, and stories from HR.
That's right.
So this week we had some elections.
That's right. Yesterday is a big day.
It's a big day, so we thought that we would talk about politics in the workplace.
That's right. Normally a very touchy subject, but let's explore it so we can kind of get a better feel about what's permissible and what's not. So Jenna, how would you say this past year as far as the political landscape? Has it been different in the workplace? Have more issues come up around discussing politics in the workplace this past year?
Yeah, I would definitely say there's been an uptick. I think people sometimes feel a little bit more emboldened, and it's sort of a contentious, polarizing environment, and with a lot of extremes, and people are expressing their feelings, I think, in a way that we haven't seen in previous years. A lot of times, where I'm seeing this is I'll be doing harassment training or workplace respect training, and this will come up as a topic. Where people will talk about, political beliefs or political issues and how to deal with that in the workplace. And here's a little tip, trend, I'm not sure, but did you know the only state where your political beliefs are actually a protected class?
I have no idea.
It's Montana.
Montana.
I would not have guessed Montana.
No.
People are always surprised. But yeah, beyond that, we look at your political beliefs are not a protected class.
Which, by the way, we should do a future session, basically between two filing cabinets, on rights you think you have that you don't.
Right, for sure.
Right.
Ooh, we have some good stuff on there.
We have some good stuff
Yeah.
there.
But it's something that people, when you talk about politics, how many of the topics are about protected class issues? And especially now, race, religion, age, sexual orientation, gender identity. And so, kind of the rule that I always, tell people is, sex, religion, politics, keep it out of the workplace. They're topics that people have very strong, very divided feelings about. But I think in today's sort of political climate, I see it creeping into the workplace a lot more.
Right. So, Jen, what we often advise people, the whole person shows up at work. So how would you coach people around, or how would you help people navigate that? So after election day, particularly if there might be some people who are really happy about some outcomes or disappointed about some outcomes, who may not even really think about being polarizing, but just kind of might come to work making some comments or reflections about what happened yesterday.
Right.
And so where do you, I know it's a general good rule of thumb, but at what point do you kind of figure out what's okay to say and what's not when it comes to just be less polarized, but just still some opinions about what's going on politically?
Yeah, the easy response would be to say, well, don't talk about any protected class issues, right? But we know that's not the reality. We know that people are going to be, mentioning some of these things.
And might not even realize, too, that they are.
And a lot of times they're not.
Right.
Or they think everyone else believes the same things as them, so they're really not aware of the impact that they're having.
Sure.
And so, I think we have to kind of manage, the reality of the workplace and the conversations that happen. And so, on an individual basis, I would tell people of, if there are people that you are comfortable with, that you have an established relationship with, probably private conversations are generally acceptable. It's up to those two people to establish what is and isn't okay, right?
True.
So if I say something that, is over the line with someone, hopefully I have a good enough reputation with them where they'll tell me. There's a difference, though, I think, than I have an established relationship with you, and, we have a good relationship where I feel like maybe we can discuss some things, and not in an offensive sort of way, just expressing, this, hey, this happened, this is interesting. Where people are more likely to get into trouble, I think, at the workplace is where they, maybe in a public way, will say something. I've had this happen in trainings where people will talk, as we're talking about, kind of those protected class issues, and it often comes up with politics. It seems like that's the one right now, where someone will say something to make it clear what their political beliefs are, who they support. Their disdain is usually, something that's coming up one way or the other, and they don't really think about it. and they don't think about what that says to everyone else. So certainly in a public environment, you have to be even more careful. You know, and other things that you look at, you know, sort of really, if where people are going to get into trouble is expressing their personal feelings. So there are certainly political issues that come up in the workplace that might be related to your work.
Sure, that makes sense.
You know, like a real estate issue, land use planning, or a tax law. I mean, those political issues where it's directly related to the work that you're doing, perhaps. And I think that's fair game. But I think it's when you get into more of those sensitive issues, and a lot of them involve protected classes, that you have to be much more aware.
Yeah, and you want to make sure too that things don't escalate. It's really easy for something to start out maybe as land use or taxation, and then quickly escalate to the state of affairs and how you feel about them.
Right, and sometimes people are like, well, freedom of speech. I get to say whatever I want to say. That comes up a lot in training.
Yeah.
Again, rights that employees think that they have that they don't,
Right.
because in the private setting, you know, the First Amendment is about the government's control of your speech. It's not about your employer's control of your speech. So your employer can say, no, you cannot talk about these things at work. If you want to express your disdain or your disgust or whatever that happens to be, we can tell you to shut that down.
Yes.
And that there are consequences for that.
No, common misconception.
Right. So Erin, you know, you do a lot of coaching with people, and so what would you do, or what would you advise someone to do if someone came up and maybe they said something that was offensive to that person, whether they realized it or not, but it made that person feel uncomfortable?
Right. Well, regardless of whether I thought they meant to or not, I would probably say something like, I'm sure you didn't mean to offend me, or I'm sure you didn't mean to be disrespectful.
Yeah.
And at the same time, I find when you use this language, you know, when you say X, Y, or Z, it makes me feel uncomfortable, or I have a different point of view, and so it makes me feel uncomfortable.
Right.
I prefer it moving forward. Again, since I know that, you know, our working relationship is important to both of us.
Right.
Perhaps we don't talk about this topic.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's hard. A hard conversation for that person to have.
Yeah.
Also hard if you're on the receiving end. What would you tell the person if they were on the receiving end of that type of comment?
Oh yeah, well, you know, probably we'll all be on the receiving end of saying something that we inadvertently said that was disrespectful. And so the first thing, take a deep breath. Actually, in either situation, take a deep breath.
Yeah.
Right? Because things are about to get a little uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Right? And just apologize.
Yeah.
Say, I'm so sorry. The last thing I meant to do was to make you uncomfortable. If you're really not sure to what it is exactly, what it was about it, feel free to explore, like, hey, I want to make sure I never make you feel this way again. So is it this topic in general, or could you tell me specifically so that I can just make sure I never repeat this? And then thank that person, because it took a lot of guts to say something. And I think, you know, when we do trainings like this, we always want to know if we've said something that, you know, appears disrespectful or offends the other person, but so few of us would volunteer that, right?
Yeah, I always do that in that training. I ask people that, like, if someone said something, you know, would you feel comfortable saying? And I get very few hands, versus if you did something, would you want to know? And we get almost all the hands up. And there's a lot of factors, you know, trust, what position it is, you know, how I've seen, you know, other people treated or other people react if you know, they've had that conversation. So it's a really difficult topic, and so I think kind of getting back, you know, just to the foundations and the basics about appropriate communication, but understanding that we are also working with humans, and we're not perfect, and people are going to make mistakes, and hopefully we have a good enough reputation with each other that if we step over that line with someone, again, intentionally or unintentionally, that they will tell us and we can change our behavior.
True, or, you know, there are going to be times too, I'm sure, when you're talking with somebody, maybe like what you were saying in that training, or there are going to be other people around, you're making a statement you think that everybody agrees with.
Right, yeah.
Right? And so you think that it's something, oh, it's fine because we all feel that way. You might have to take that person aside later or follow up with them and say, hey, look, I know that it's fine for us to talk about this. We're of a similar mind, but we need to be conscious that not everybody might feel the same way. We tend to make those assumptions, and the last thing we want is to make anybody feel uncomfortable, either a fellow employee, a client, a customer.
And especially in leadership positions, sometimes people will, say something like that inadvertently, not really thinking, and that sends a very clear message to people. And so, I think it's a big challenge. I think it's something that if I were an employer, I would probably be spending some extra time investing in some training on workplace harassment, respect in the workplace, communication, because I do see it breaking down, and I see some behaviors that I have not seen in previous years. So kind of an interesting environment.
Yeah, so hopefully as others are emboldened to kind of make comments, hopefully people at our membership organizations and out there will be a little bit more emboldened to do something about it, be a bit more proactive with what is or is not kind of appropriate in a workplace setting.
Right. So hopefully you've got a few tips on how to handle these situations in your workplace, because chances are they will come up, and especially during these times when we're having some elections and a lot of stuff going on. So we're going to file this one under politics.
Sounds good to me.
All right. We'll see you next week.
Thanks.